Today we're going to talk about social psychology and just give you one specific experiment that illustrates it because it's such a broad area, of course, like all the other areas we've covered. It's just an idea to give you an in-depth experiment here. I want to look at a woman named Karen Dion, who at the time she did this was a young PhD student, and she was doing her dissertation on attractiveness. And her name is Karen Dion. She's gone on to do lots of studies in this area and actually some similar areas and very different areas as well. Very powerful researcher. And she had a very simple common sense question, and that is, are good-looking kids treated better than kids that aren't as good-looking? I remember, the experiences, I don't know how many of you went through this pain, but probably several of us did, where we were the last, you'd have the kids pick people for baseball teams, and, it'd be me and this kid named Donnie who was riding the little yellow school bus, picked last who got to play baseball, and you always kind of felt humiliated being the last one and so forth. And when she looks at this, she wants to do an experiment to test this. Now, an experiment is a research method, as you know, that's different than a case study or different than participant observation or different than a questionnaire and things of that nature. It has some specific things which imply pretty strongly that cause and effect has taken place. So let's take a look at her study. So she's curious about whether good-looking people are treated differently than people that aren't as good-looking. And of course, her general hypothesis is going to be that good-looking people are treated better, but she wants to test that specifically. Now, immediately, what kind of research problem would she have if she wanted to deal with good-looking versus not good-looking kids? Well, how do you define good-looking? You and I probably are attracted to different people, of our own age or similar ages, and we look at kids and we think some kids are cute and we think some kids are ugly and homemade sin. How do you define the difference? Well, if we're going to do a scientific study, we have to do what we call operationalize the definition. And operationalize the definition simply means putting the variable good-looking into some measurable context so that, as in all science, someone else can redo our study and know what we're talking about and test it to see if we found reasonable results or not. And so there's some other reasons as well. So we're going to operationalize our definition. How did she do that? Well, she did it in a variety of ways. Let me move this for just a second, and I'll get it back later. She did it in a variety of ways in operationalizing her definition. And she said, okay, let's get kids directly out of it. Let's just use black and white photos. And so she's showing all these photos to the first group panel of judges. And they'll only be the panel of judges for the first part of the study. And she asks each one to individually study this and gives them all these pictures. And she said, put every picture that you think is good looking in one pile and every picture you think is bad looking in another pile. All right? And she did this with all the judges in this first part of the study. So she ends up with a stack of photos of kids. And these were, kids that everybody agreed were good looking. This is her definition of what good looking means. There was another stack, and that was the kids that were not considered very good looking, and that was a stack of pictures that everybody had to agree upon. And we'll call them unattractive children. And of course, being human beings, this panel of judges, doing it all individually, disagreed on some of them. And every picture that was disagreed upon was put in a third pile and thrown out of the study. So that's how she defined what good looking was and unattractive. It was based on opinion, but it was systematic study of opinion, and she threw out all the ones that there were mixed opinions on. So that's the first panel of judges. That first panel will not be used again. All right, now what's the second thing she does? Karen Dion then says, okay, I'm going to pick a group of women, and she happened to pick college women, and her logic was that she's really dealing with educational issues that are of educational importance. If a little kid is treated badly and not encouraged to learn when they're young because they're unattractive, well, teachers need to learn how to deal with that. And who become most elementary school teachers even now in the new century, and that's still females, so a primary number who are elementary teachers. So she got a group of college women who were the experimenter, were the people who were in the experiment, and she randomly gave each woman one photo with a misdeed attached. So some women are going to get an attractive child, some women are going to get an unattractive child, but an attractive child and unattractive child will be alleged to have done the exact same misdeed. All right, got that? Second group of people, group of college women, randomly get a picture, they're asked to go into private, and they're actually asked to answer several questions about that picture. Now let's take a look at one of the pictures, and one of the statements that were, two of the pictures, and one of the statements that were put on. Carl, can you zoom in on those pictures? If you look at these pictures, you see a boy on my right, on your right as well, I guess, and that boy appears in the photo to be an attractive, happy child, and the boy on the left appears, from the scowl on his face, to be unhappy and doesn't look all that attractive. And so at the bottom of this is a statement. So one woman would get this child with the statement, another woman would get the other child, the attractive child, with the same statement. And the statement is, at one corner of the playground, a dog was sleeping. Peter stood a short distance from the dog, picked up some sharp stones from the ground, and threw them at the animal. Two of the stones struck the dog and cut its leg. The animal jumped up, yelping, and looked away. Peter continued to throw rocks at the dog as it tried to move away from him. Interesting. So now we've got an experimental and a control group set up. And so we're then going to ask them 3 questions. And one question is, how serious was the offense? How serious was the offense? And they'll rate it on a scale, I forget the exact numbers, but let's say there was a scale of 1 to 7. That's a very common social psychological scale, or 1 to 5, something of that nature. From not serious at all to very serious. So now we have a numerical comparison to make. So will the average woman rate the attractive kids as having done a more serious offense or a less serious offense than the unattractive? Second thing, how likely will the kid repeat it? Again, a scale of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or something like that, from very unlikely to very likely. Okay? So now we have a third statement that they're asked to deal with. And the third statement is, how much punishment, with some descriptions attached, should Peter get? And there were many different situations and different pictures besides just this description, but they all worked in the same way. Again, a scale of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, with some descriptions about this would be the least or no punishment, this would be the most punishment. So now they've got 3 hypotheses. What are they? Well, hypothesis is a what? An educated guess. One hypothesis is that good-looking kids will have their offenses rated as less serious. Number 2, good-looking kids will be seen as less likely to repeat the offense. And number 3, good-looking kids will be recommended to have less serious punishment. Now you might say, well, duh, isn't that common sense? We know that tall men make more than short men on average in their careers. We know that good-looking people are treated differently. Well, we test those things as how we ever really get to know them. And when we look at this picture, we see that we've got the pictures and we've got the description underneath. Well, what did they find? Here's what they found. Something that was a little surprising. Findings. 1, good-looking kids' behavior, remember it was the same as the not good-looking kids, rated as less serious. So does that agree with our hypothesis? Absolutely. And if we have a p-value of less than 0.05, which she did, probability that it was by chance was very low, so she accepted that. Number 2, and I'll just put good-looking kids, G-L-K here to save time. Good-looking kids were rated as less likely to repeat the offense. I spelled offense with a C a while ago. I think it has an S in it. So good-looking kids were rated as less likely to repeat the offense. That's number 2. So that agreed with the hypothesis number 2 as well. So her data backed all that up. But number 3 was a surprise. There was no difference in the recommended punishment for good-looking kids and unattractive kids. So that's somewhat reassuring about human nature. And studies since then seem to have agreed with that by and large. So this was a surprise. So this disagreed with our hypothesis. That's why we do these studies, because sometimes what seems utterly common sense turns out not to be the case. So this one disagreed. So let's take a look at practical applications real quickly. Well, it's nice she did a bunch of other studies. Other people did studies that followed this up. They published them in journal articles. People read those journal articles, and then they design their own studies. And they kept finding these sorts of things. What effect did Karen Dionne's research have? Well, virtually every school of education in America now has a training section based upon Karen Dionne's research and other people's research that trains prospective teachers how to minimize their biases against kids who might not be particularly attractive. So that something as simple as that. So here's an experiment. Final comment. What was our independent or cause variable? Remember, we have cause and effect we're trying to establish in an experiment. What was our independent variable in this study? Well, the independent, whoops, independent. I guess that's like a dumb dependent. Independent variable or cause variable, and that was level of attractiveness of the kid. All right, so the cause variable was the level of attractiveness of the kid. What was the dependent variable? Well, we actually had 3. These were the 3 outcomes. And the dependent variables, therefore, were the measures of, was the good-looking kid seen as doing a more serious offense or less serious offense? Was the good-looking kid rated as less likely to repeat the behavior? And then finally, was the good-looking kid given less punishment? Those are our dependent or outcome or effect variables. So we have a classic experiment. Thank you very much.